The city awoke before the sun dot it always did, long before light crested the eastern horizon and brushed the baked brick walls with gold. Mohenjo-daro stirred like a living being drawing its first breath of the day. From the narrow lanes of the lower town to the raised bulk of the citadel, water flowed, feet moved, fires were kindled, and the soft murmur of human voices rose to meet the birds. Rue stood at the mouth of his family's courtyard, bare feet cool against the smooth brick floor, and listened. The drains whispered beneath him. That sound low, constant, hidden was the heartbeat of the city. Every house in Mohenjo-daro fed it. Every bath, every jar poured clean at dawn, every rain that fell and was guided carefully away. The elders said the drains were the city's veins, carrying away its impurities so it could remain pure and ordered. Rue believed this with the unquestioning certainty of a boy who had never known another way of living. He was 14 summers old and already apprenticed to his uncle, a maker of standardized bricks for the western quarter. His hands were roughened by clay and water, his shoulders beginning to broaden. Today, however, his work would wait. Today was a measuring day. From the citadel came the deep note of a conch shell, blown once, then again long and deliberate. Rue felt it in his chest more than his ears. Doors opened along the lane. Women stepped out with their hair bound and jars balanced on their hips. Men paused mid-task. Children appeared like birds, darting into the street. The city was being counted. Rue's mother, Senna, emerged behind him, adjusting the edge of her shawl. Her eyes, sharp and observant, were already scanning the street. "Do not run," she said without turning to him. "Watch, remember. One day you will need to know how order is kept." Rue nodded, though his feet itched to move. From the north, the officials came. They wore no crowns, no bright colors. Their authority lay not in spectacle, but in sameness. Each man carried a small bag at his side and a staff marked with precise incisions. Around their necks hung seals carved from steatite unicorns, bulls, figures seated in yogic stillness. Symbols no one alive could fully read. Yet everyone obeyed. Behind them walked scribes, younger and quieter. Holding tablets of damp clay. The procession moved slowly, stopping at each junction, each market square. Measurements were taken. Jars were weighed. Bricks were inspected. Rue watched as one official crouched to examine the corner of a drain, running his fingers along the mortar line. "Too wide," the man said calmly. The homeowner bowed his head. "No punishment?" Rue whispered. Senna shook her head. "Correction is not punishment." That was how Mohenjo-daro ruled itself. By midday, the sun pressed hard against the city, and the streets emptied into shade. Rue carried a basket of bread and dates toward the citadel, following his uncle Raven, whose long strides spoke of quiet importance. The citadel rose above the rest of the city like a thought made solid. Its walls were thicker, its platforms higher. From its summit, one could see the Indus River glinting in the distance. Wide and patient, Raven was permitted there. Rue was not. At the base of the citadel steps. Raven stopped. "Wait," he said. Rue sat in the shade and watched men pass in and out, priests, engineers, merchants, women carrying woven cloth, guards with no weapons beyond staffs. And there he felt his breath catch. Water-bearers ascending toward the great bath. Everyone in Mohenjo-daro knew the bath. It was older than any living memory. Its bricks sealed so perfectly that water never escaped where it should not. Some said the city was built around it. Others said the bath itself was the city's heart, and that if it ever cracked, Mohenjo-daro would die. Abhor. You closed his eyes and imagined it filled. The water reflecting the sky, the people entering in silence. When Raven returned, his face was grave. "The river has shifted again," he said. Rue frowned. It always does. Yes, Raven replied. But this time it has remembered an older path. That night, as the city cooled and stars emerged like pinpricks in dark cloth, Rue lay awake listening to the drains. They whispered more loudly than usual. In his dreams, the bricks loosened. Water rose where it should not. Seals cracked. The great bath stood empty, its floor split like dry earth. And above it all, the city breathed once, twice, and then held its breath, as if waiting to see whether it would ever exhale again. The measure hall was cooler than the streets outside. Its thick brick walls held the night's breath well into the morning, and the floor laid in precise rectangles seemed to impose calm on those who entered. Rue felt it immediately, as if his steps had been slowed by the geometry beneath his feet. He had never been inside before. Raven walked ahead, his posture straight, his pace unhurried. At the doorway, he placed his palm against the wall, fingers splayed, a gesture half habit, half reverence. Rue copied him without being told. Inside, light fell from narrow openings high above, cutting the air into pale bands. Along the walls stood low platforms bearing stone weights, cubical, smooth, identical except for size. Beside them lay measuring rods of shell and ivory, their edges worn by generations of hands. Men and women worked silently. They weighed grain. They measured cloth. They compared bricks against a master form kept beneath a linen cloth. No voices were raised. No overseer shouted. Yet nothing escaped notice. Rue's gaze fixed on the largest of the stone weights. Why is it never used? He whispered. Raven followed his eyes. Because perfection is not meant to be handled, he said, only approached. At the center of the hall stood Ishkur. He was not tall, nor broad, nor particularly old. What marked him was stillness. While others moved around him, Ishkur remained as fixed as the measures themselves, his dark eyes observing everything without haste. A measure keeper, Rue had heard stories. That Ishkur could tell the weight of a brick by lifting it once. That he knew which drains would fail before the rains came. That he could read the seals, not their sounds, but their intent. Raven stopped before him and bowed not deeply, but fully. I bring my nephew, Raven said. His hands are steady. His mind listens. Ishkur studied Rue as if he were another object to be assessed. Not unkindly, but without softness. How many bricks make a wall? Ishkur asked. Rue swallowed. As many as the wall requires. A pause. Raven's jaw tightened. Then Ishkur smiled a small, brief curve of the lips. And how many measures make a city? Rue thought of the drains, the streets, the bath, the river beyond the walls. Enough, he said. If they agree. The smile lingered. They worked until the sun stood high. Aru learned to balance the weights, to feel the moment when the scale ceased its argument and accepted equilibrium. He learned that a brick too small was as dangerous as one too large, that disorder often hid in what seemed insignificant. During a pause, Ishkur motioned him closer. Tell me, the measure keeper said, lifting a seal carved with a horned figure seated cross-legged. What do you see? A man, Rue said. Or a god. And beyond that? Rue hesitated. Stillness. Ishkur nodded. That is what the city strives for. Not power. Not growth. Stillness that endures. From outside came a distant shout. It was rare enough that everyone froze. A scribe hurried in, breathless. The lower town granary, he said. A weight does not match its mark. Ishkur closed his eyes for a brief moment. Show me. The granary smelled of dust and grain and sweat. Merchants stood clustered like anxious birds, their voices low but urgent. At the center, a single stone weight lay apart from the others. To Rue's eye, it looked no different. Ishkur knelt, lifted it, and set it back down. This weight was made in the East, he said. A murmur rippled through the room. It is correct, a merchant protested. I swear it. It was correct, Ishkur replied. Before the river shifted, silence fell. Raven felt it, then the thread connecting brick, measure, water, and time. A city so precisely balanced could not absorb change without consequence. What will you do? The merchant asked. Ishkur stood. We will make new measures. But the old ones belong to the old river. Ishkur finished gently. Ru felt a chill despite the heat. As they left the granary. He looked back once more at the stone weight, suddenly aware that even stone could become wrong. That night, a conch shell sounded again. Not once, but twice. Short and sharp. A signal Ru had never heard before. Above the city, unseen in the dark, the river continued its slow, ancient argument with the land. Water defined Mohenjo-daro long. Before brick did dot, it shaped the city's patience. Before dawn, Ru followed the sound of its soft pores, the splash of jars, the careful hush of drainage channels being rinsed clean. He walked beside Daya, the water engineer, whose hair had gone silver, though his stride remained quick. Do you hear the difference? Daya asked. Ru listened. The drains are louder. They are uneasy, Daya replied. Like people when they sense a lie. They descended into a narrow passage beneath the street, where the air was damp and cool. Brickwork arched above them, fitted so precisely that no mortar was visible. Water trickled along a sloped channel, clear and controlled. This is where the city confesses, Daya said. Everything unwanted comes here. Ru had never thought of it that way. At a junction, Daya stopped and crouched, pressing his palm against the bricks. He frowned. The slope is wrong, he murmured. Can you fix it? Ru asked. Daya shook his head. I can correct it. Fixing would imply it was broken. The city is not broken yet. By midday, they stood atop the citadel, overlooking the great bath. It lay empty, its brick basin exposed to the sun. The stairs descended in perfect symmetry, each step worn smooth. By centuries of feet, bitumen sealed the joints, black and unyielding. When it is full, Daya said, the city holds its breath. Ru imagined the silence, the water unmoving. The people gathered, waiting. Why empty it now? He asked. Because the river is impatient, Daya replied. And impatience always climbs upward. Beyond the citadel walls, the Indus stretched wide and deceptive. Its surface glittered, betraying nothing of its slow encroachment inland. That afternoon, clouds gathered without rain. The air thickened. Birds flew low. In the lower town, wells began to taste of silt. Senna noticed first. This water is tired, she said, spitting it out. Word spread quickly. Jars were carried to different wells. Some were clear. Others smelled faintly of rot. By evening, Ishkur convened the water council. They met not in the citadel, but beside the drains, where sound mattered more than speech. Daya spoke first. The river has risen below us, he said. Not in height, but in will. It presses against older channels. And if it wins? Someone asked. Daya did not answer. Ishkur placed a measuring rod into the flowing channel and watched the water line. When water disobeys, he said, it is not rebellion. It is memory. Ru shivered. Memory of what? Ishkur met his gaze. Of paths we thought forgotten. That night, the great bath was filled. No ceremony was announced, yet people came quietly, as if summoned by instinct. Torches flickered. Reflections trembled on the water's surface. Ru stood at the edge, heart pounding. One by one, they descended, engineers, merchants, potters, children. They entered the water in silence, submerging themselves, emerging again with water streaming down their faces. When Rue stepped in, the cold stole his breath. Beneath the surface, the bricks were smooth and unyielding. For a moment, he felt suspended between what was held and what was held back. Above them, far beyond the citadel walls, the river shifted again. This time, it did not whisper, it groaned. The seals were small enough to disappear in a clenched fist. Yet, they moved the city. Aru first understood this in the western market, where traders from distant lands spread their goods beneath awnings of dyed cloth. Lapis from the mountains, shell from the far sea, copper shaped into thin, precise tools. No guards stood watch. No shouted commands kept order, only seals pressed into clay. Raven lifted one from a merchant's table. A unicorn, its single horn curved with deliberate elegance. "This one," he said, "travels farther than you ever will." The merchant smiled thinly. "It has crossed deserts." "And returned," Raven replied. Rue watched as the merchant pressed the seal into a lump of wet clay, fixing it to a bundle of goods. The mark was crisp, unmistakable. "Does it mean his name?" Rue asked. "No," Raven said. "It means his promise." Later that day, Ishkur summoned Rue alone. The measure keeper's chamber was spare brick walls, a single mat, shelves lined with seals wrapped in linen. Ishkur unwrapped one carefully and placed it between them. A horned bull, powerful. Still, who commands the city? Ishkur asked. Rue hesitated. "The council." "And who commands the council?" Rue searched for the answer and found only silence. Ishkur nodded. "Good. Power that can be named can be broken." He pressed the seal into clay. "This mark binds trade, labor, and trust. Yet the seal itself is nothing without belief." Rue leaned closer. "What happens when belief cracks?" Ishkur's fingers stilled. "Then symbols become weapons." That evening, a seal was found broken. It lay in the street near the southern gate, split cleanly in two. People gathered but did not touch it. Broken symbols unsettled them more than broken bricks. The seal bore a familiar mark, the seated figure, eyes closed, surrounded by animals. Rue felt a tightness in his chest. "Is it an accident?" "No," Daya said quietly. "Seals do not break themselves." The council convened by torchlight. Whispers moved faster than reason. Trade could halt. Trust could unravel. Ishkur knelt, examining the fracture. "It was struck," he said. "Deliberately. But not in anger." "Then why?" "Someone demanded. To be seen," Ishkur replied. By morning, copies of the seal's impression appeared crudely made, pressed into clay on doorways, storage jars, even drains. The symbol was wrong, its proportions distorted, its stillness corrupted. False seals. Merchants argued. Weights were questioned. Measures doubted. Rue felt the city tilt not physically, but inwardly, as if its shared understanding had shifted. Raven gripped his shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "A city survives floods. It does not survive mistrust." That night, Ishkur sealed the remaining originals away. "The city must remember," he told Rue. That power was never in the mark. Outside, the river ran darker than before, carrying with it fragments of clay. Broken symbols dissolving back into mud. The great bath was never merely full. It was held. On the morning the council announced the immersion. No herald cried out. No drum was struck. Yet by mid-morning, the citadel steps were crowded. People ascended in silence, their feet leaving faint dust marks on brick worn smooth by centuries of ascent. Rue climbed with his mother and uncle. Senna's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, as if to remind herself he was still there. Raven's eyes never left the top of the stairs. At the edge of the bath, the city paused. Water lay within the basin like a sheet of darkened sky, unbroken by wind. The smell of bitumen rose faintly in the heat. Sunlight slid down the brick steps and vanished into the depths. Ishkur stood at the northern edge. Barefoot, his seal cord looped around his wrist. "When a city is uncertain," he said, his voice carrying without effort, "it returns to what cannot argue." No one answered. He stepped into the water. They entered in groups, not by trade, not by age, not by rank, but by household. The city dissolved itself into its smallest units. Families descended together, submerged together, emerged together. When it was Ru's turn, the water closed over his shoulders, his ears, his thoughts. Sound vanished. Light fractured for a heartbeat. There was nothing but pressure and stillness. Then he surfaced around him. Faces shone with water and something like relief. Children clung to parents. Elders closed their eyes. The bath absorbed fear without comment. Above them, the citadel walls stood impassive. At the basin's center, Daya knelt, pressing his palms against the submerged bricks. "It is holding," he murmured. "But for how long?" Senna asked. Daya did not look up. "As long as it remembers its purpose." Ru felt the words settle heavily. At sunset, the water was released, carefully, precisely. Channels opened. Drains accepted the flow. The bath emptied without sound, its water returning to the unseen arteries beneath the city. When the last rivulet vanished, the basin lay bare, darkened bricks gleaming like wet skin. A crack ran along the southern stair. It was thin, almost delicate, but it was new. Ru saw Ishkur see it. Their eyes met across the empty bath. Nothing was said. That night, the city did not sleep. People spoke in low voices behind closed doors. Some packed belongings. Others measured grain again, suspicious of even familiar weights. Ru lay awake, listening not to the drains, but to the silence between them. At dawn, a runner arrived from the Eastern Watch. "The river has breached an old channel," he said. "It is moving toward the lower wells." Ishkur closed his eyes. The bath had spoken, and it had warned. The river did not arrive. As a flood that would have been simpler. It came as insistence. Day by day, the wells of the lower town changed. Water that had once risen clear now carried a taste of earth and age. Potters complained their clay behaved differently. Brickmakers found hairline fractures where none had been before. Raven returned each evening with his hands stained darker than clay. "The earth is remembering being river," he told Senna quietly. Ru followed Daya through the eastern quarter, where the ground sloped almost imperceptibly. Wooden markers had been driven into the soil, each carved with symbols Ru did not recognize. "Older measures," Daya said. From before the city learned to forget. They reached a place where brick streets gave way to packed earth. A shallow trickle cut through it, unremarkable to the eye. "This was once a riverbed," Daya said. "Long before walls." Ru stared. "Can we stop it?" Daya shook his head. "Rivers are not stopped. They are convinced." The council met daily. Now not all agreed. Some argued for higher embankments, thicker walls, more brick. Others urged retreat, controlled abandonment of the eastern quarters. "A city that moves survives," one elder sighed. "A city that yields is no city at all," another replied. Ishkur listened. At last he spoke. "We have mistaken permanence for strength." Silence followed. That night rain fell far upriver. It did not reach Mohenjo-daro, but the river heard it. By morning, water seeped into cellars. Drains ran backward, murmuring unfamiliar sounds. The city's veins resisted, then adapted, then strained. You helped his mother lift jars onto higher shelves. "Will we leave?" he asked. Senna paused. "The city may," she said. "We will follow." At the great bath, Daya traced the crack with his fingers. "It has grown," he said. Ishkur nodded. So has our certainty. They stood together, watching water gather where it had never gathered before. Far away, unseen but relentless, the river completed its turn. It chose its older path, and Mohenjo-daro, for the first time in generations, was no longer at the center of its world. Fire came where water could not as flame, not as smoke, but as heat that lingered too long in the air and tempers that refused to cool. The city dried unevenly. Streets nearest the old riverbed stayed damp, while the western quarters cracked under the sun. Kilns burned longer now. Brickmakers whispered of clay that resisted shaping, of bricks that rang wrong when struck together. Raven returned one evening with a fractured mold in his hands. It split while cooling, he said. No water error. No fire excess. Senna examined it. Then the fault is not in the making. Raven nodded grimly. It is in the place? In the markets, arguments flared. A merchant accused another of false weights. A potter refused a seal he had trusted for years. Voices rose not loud, but sharp. Rue watched Ishkur intervene once, stepping between two men with nothing but his presence. Heat seeks release, Ishkur said calmly. Do not let it choose for you. The men stepped back, ashamed. But the heat did not leave. One night, a kiln in the southern quarter collapsed. No one was injured, but the bricks within had fused into useless glassy lumps. The fire had burned clean, no ash, no soot, only ruin. Daya knelt among the debris. The ground is holding heat, he said. It does not give it back. What does that mean? Rue asked. It means the city is storing what it cannot release. Rumors spread. Some said the seals had angered the river. Others said the bath crack had broken a pact older than memory. A few whispered that the city had grown too still, that it had stopped listening. At night, Rue heard raised voices through the walls. We should leave now, one said. We should stay until the measures fail. Completely, another argued. Words frightened him more than the river ever. Had the council chamber grew crowded. Families sent representatives. Trade sent elders. For the first time, voices overlapped. Ishkur waited. When he spoke, it was softly. Fire cleans when it is allowed to burn. It destroys when it is trapped. A murmur ran through the room. We must release what we cannot keep, he continued, even if it means letting go of this place. Silence followed. Not agreement, not refusal, but recognition. That night, Rue climbed to the citadel alone. From its height, he saw the city spread beneath him, ordered still, beautiful still, but strained like clay. Before cracking, he pressed his palm against the brick. It was warm. From sun. From holding too much for too long. Not everyone left. A handful remained behind, not out of defiance, but duty. Watchers, they called themselves. Keepers of alignment, listeners for collapse. Ishkur was among them. The city felt different. Without voices. Sound traveled farther. Footsteps echoed. The drains still whispered, but to no one in particular. Ishkur walked the empty streets each morning, touching walls, counting cracks, noting where weeds pushed between bricks. The city remembers being full, he said aloud once, and it does not resent being empty. At night, he slept in the measure hall. Dreams came less often now. For those who left, the world widened. Paths became choices rather than streets. Camps formed near old watercourses. Bricks were reused, but measures changed, adapted to slope and soil. Rue grew into his hands. He taught others how to listen to ground before building, how to let water pass without being trapped. The seals they carried were pressed less often now, but their meaning endured. This is from Mohenjo-daro, he would say. People nodded. Even when they had never seen the city. Seasons passed. The river reclaimed streets gently, then decisively. Roofs fell inward. Wells filled with silt. Birds nested where councils once met. The citadel stood longest. Ishkur left last. Before he went, he placed the master weight at the highest point and covered it with brick fragments. For those who listen, he whispered. Then he followed the road east. Years later, cities rose elsewhere. They were different. Streets curved. Drains adapted. Walls bent where Mohenjo-daro had insisted on straightness. Yet beneath variation lay familiar logic, careful balance, shared trust, quiet authority. Ru, now gray at the temples, watched children measure grain. Why this size? One asked. Because it agrees with the others, he replied. Stories hardened into teaching. Fire that must be released. Water that remembers. Brick that lasts only when it listens. To the earth beneath it. Mohenjo-daro became a word meaning both origin and warning. Not a ruin, a lesson centuries later. Hands uncovered fired brick beneath the plains. Perfect angles, unbroken drains. Ah, city that had waited. No gold, kings, only order, patience, and the quiet proof that a civilization could end without forgetting itself. Above it all, the river flowed on, changed again and again. But beneath the dust, Mohenjo-daro still breathed.